Hello there and happy new week. Well, apologies for starting a bit behind schedule, but this is Business Nigeria, broadcasting live from the Co-Atlantic Victoria Island at Lagos. Welcome and thank you so much for joining us. These are the top stories we are tracking for you at this time. CBN says Federation's account surges from 6.8 trillion naira from corporate tax and VAT, set to intensify crackdowns on Ponzi schemes in 2025. Shares model in Asian, Canadian dollar up on trading reports. Well, on our show today, first, we will be talking about the telecommunications market with operators appealing for tariff increase, of course, from the regulator as customers call for a halt. Well, this has been a flip. It's been on both sides where everyone is maintaining different positions. We'll be connecting to the managing director of Nile Mobile in the course of the show. But the other part of the show will be discussing global issues that will shape the global economy, of course, in 2025. Well, some stories making headlines before we get quickly to our point of discussion today. Now, let's tell you that we start with economic growth, where a new report from the Central Bank of Nigeria says money flow into the Federation account grew from 6.8 trillion naira in the third quarter of 2024. This represents a 7.48% increase from the previous quarter. According to the Apex Bank, the extra money came mainly from increased company taxes and VAT, value-added tax, with most of it from non-oil sources, which brought in 5.56 trillion naira, while oil declined to 5.56%, while oil revenue declined by 24.72% to 1.3 trillion naira compared to the previous quarter, from about 6.87 trillion naira collected in government share, 3.92 trillion among different levels of government. Federal government got 1.27 trillion naira, states got 1.36 trillion naira, local governments got 99 billion naira. All producing states received an additional 30 billion naira through 13% derivation fund. Well, let's get quickly to our discussion. Like I said, we will be connecting with to discuss the telecommunications sector. But first, let's start with some global issues that are expected to shape the economy this year. Of course, it's a new year and a lot of projections and reprojections that we've seen in recent times. I have Mr. Tajuddin Ibrahim, is a friend of the house. Yes, Director, Research and Strategy, Chapel Hill, Denham. Thank you so much for coming into the studio live. We appreciate this.
Thank you for having me on today.
Yes.
You have a very nice studio.
Thank you so much. It's good to at least have you start this with us. But let's look at these issues globally. There's been lots of back and forth, of course, even in Nigeria. But let's look at the global space and see what's been playing out. What are those things you think would definitely shaping economic forecast and, of course, outlook for 2025 in your
I think there are a lot of elements for consideration. Number one, to start with, let's take a look at what happens in terms of policy. And when I say policy, I'm speaking to what happens in the U.S. in terms of how the new president, Donald Trump, whatever policies that he puts in place. And key of those policies in terms of consideration is, trade policy. So we have seen him, seeking or looking to impose tariff increases on some, imports to the U.S. from some countries like China, for instance. So we expect that to have a major impact on global trade. Yes. That is number one. Interesting also to bear in mind that we have a world that is not completely devoid of dependence on crude oil and gas in this case. So we expect, oil and gas to also play a pivotal role in the global economy in terms of what to expect, particularly in terms of the pricing and how the Middle East unrest is going to shape or affect, in energy prices. So I think, all of those elements are very important. The final thing I will touch on is what is happening in the Middle East in terms of the unrest in that place. The unrest in that place has the capacity to stoke inflation globally.
Stubborn inflation.
Exactly. So it is a major consideration, I believe, for global authorities that they have to consider to see how that can be addressed. Because if it is not addressed, it's going to escalate to global higher inflation, and that will spread to emerging markets, and Africa, of course, will not be excluded.
But we've seen inflation also taper down in some cases. I think we saw that in the United States, I think. And but many would say that let's come back to Nigeria now, our country, what's been happening. There's a projection, government is saying, oh, we are headed for 15%, 18% inflation. But in your thoughts, the fallout of the reforms that we've seen, what is your own outlook for Nigeria's economy in focus?
I think if we pick one indicator, which is inflation in this case, my sense is that we are not going to see a magic. There is no magic anywhere. We have to do the workings and arrive at the desired results. And I believe the desired result is for us to have much lower inflation rates. I reckon that two major things most likely are going to happen this year. Number one, it could be a case that we have lower inflation, largely speaking because we have high base effect last year. Number two, it could be that the government is deliberate by taking the right decisions and implementing the right strategies to ensure that we address all of our legacy issues. One of the key issues that we have that we still are combating with is insecurity. If that is addressed, then we can be talking about much lower inflation rates for this year. Second thing that has to be addressed is currency stability. If we have currency stability, I think we can be talking about inflation rates that is much lower. So if we put those two key elements together and you add, of course, stable food prices, then we should be talking about much lower inflation rates that is driven by deliberate effort of the government. Not inflation rate that is lower, but driven by high base effect of last year. I think the government has to look in that direction so that there will be comments, positive comments around the government's strategies yielding the right results. The final element to my mind is talking about, the National Bureau of Statistics talking about rebasing our consumer price index.
That's true.
If that materializes, one major thing is going to happen. We are going to see a much lower weight for the food sub-index. And if that is the case, Nigerians are going to see much lower inflation rates. It is not driven by policy, it is just driven by, some reassessment of the way we look at the index. It does not mean that prices are falling or they are rising at a much slower pace. It is just that we have reassessed the way we look at the CPI. And I think the second element to my mind, which is government policy, driving lower inflation, is what the government should focus on. And I think we will also see positive results this year and possibly continue into next year, in my view.
I'm interested in the currency aspect of it. For some time we've seen this stability in our foreign exchange market. It's been hovering between 1,500, 1,600. Many will say that's not where we should be, but it seems there seems to be a bit of stability. Now, in your thoughts now, what do you basically think is responsible for this sudden stability?
So maybe we should start from what I call the fair value of the currency.
Okay.
Every security,
and is it properly priced?
So it is not properly priced as we speak.
Okay.
I think the naira is undervalued.
At the moment?
At the moment in the market, the fair value for the currency based on our estimate is around 1,000 naira. And if you look at economic data in the past couple of quarters, yes, you will see that Nigeria has been recording higher, trade surplus. When you have higher trade surplus over the past 8 quarters, why is your currency under pressure? So it means there are some other elements apart from the fundamentals that are driving the weakness of the currency in the FX market. And that is why I believe what we are seeing in that market now in terms of trading activities is pointing to B-match that the CBN introduced, where market participants come on Bloomberg to trade. That B-match is performing wonder, in my view. because it is post that introduction on January 2nd, December 2024, that we started to see the currency appreciate.
Yes.
We began to see the currency being stable. And I must point out that in Kenya, Nigeria is not the only country where BMAT has been introduced. We have it introduced in Kenya. On the 6th of January 2024, Kenya introduced BMAT to address all of the inefficiencies in the FX market. Guess what? Kenyan shillings appreciated by 21% against the US dollars last year, largely speaking because of the BMAT trading platform. And I think Nigeria can also expect something similar. And I think the first quarter of this year will show us the numbers so that we understand whether we are going to see stability, appreciation, or depreciation of the currency. But I think we most likely are going to see an appreciation because that platform just removes, in large part, what is considered inefficiency in the FX market.
Another thing that I feel that would also shape the globe for this year, and I'll like your sense around it, is this refining, Nigeria becoming a refining hub. Yes, already I see that nod. You see Dangote refinery is on stream, 650,000 barrels capacity there. We have Port Harcourt refinery on stream, Warri refinery, NNPC is telling you we are doing this back to back. These refineries are coming up. BUA is also coming up and saying we're wrapping up, we're completing our project sometime maybe by the end of 2025. When all of this comes on stream, it has an impact on the global economy.
It does, and the impact, to my mind, for Nigeria to start with is positive. But the impact, when you look at it from a global standpoint, it means Nigeria is now standing up to compete with the other countries across the world. Some countries will not like this because what it means is that you are coming to the table to have a share of their cake.
Of course, that's what it is.
And I think that is the way to view the competitive landscape going forward. Nigeria is now at the table with its fork and knife to have a share of the global cake in terms of the oil and gas sector, particularly speaking to refining of crude oil products. So it is a good thing for us, but for the other countries over there, it is rather negative because we have to eat part of the pie.
But you know that Nigerians will tell you that we want the price. Price is what everyone is talking about. Who wanted to drop it? Well, we've seen a bit of decline towards the end of the year. Also, marketers, I don't know, maybe just I saw that in the papers, and of course it's online, saying it's possible fuel sells for as low as 500 naira.
It is very possible because this thing is a function of two things. Number one, you are refining locally.
Yes.
Number two, you have removed the element of FX volatility because it is now being sold in naira to local refiners. The third element to my mind is that we have a lot of them that are now getting higher. The number of refiners are increasing, and what that means is that we are going to see competition in the market. If I can compete more favorably than you, then I sell more. When I sell more, I reduce the price. The major element also for consideration is what is happening to global crude oil prices. It is never static. It goes up, it comes down. When it comes down, Nigeria can see 500 naira per liter PMS price. I think we should watch out for that.
Interesting stuff. I'm sure people will take note of this and take it to the bank. Well, let's look at non-oil exports. It's also something that interests me because government talks very much about raising revenue, and many will say that the focus on oil and gas is getting to that point where we know that that's not the only, that's not where we can. Absolutely. We know of the tax reforms that are on and all that government is also doing around that space. So what more are you looking at in your thoughts with regards to the non-oil space and other sources of revenue for government?
So when we look at the non-oil space, I think we need to do a lot more. Let's take a look at crude oil just before we come back to the non-oil sector. Crude oil in this case, we are now sort of not relying only on the sale of crude oil as a form of export. We are now refining. That is, we are adding value to export. Dangote is already exporting refined, PMS. So what that means is that Dangote got, crude oil, added value to it and then sell. When you do that, you will get more value in terms of, what you get as per export. But when it is a case that we are not adding value, That is what is largely speaking happening in the non-oil sector, because in the non-oil sector, we are largely speaking just selling raw materials. Then the raw materials that we are selling, we are not adding value to them. If we want to sell cocoa in larger quantity, let us add more value and export more of chocolates in terms of the volume. When we do more of that value addition, Nigeria is going to record a lot more, a much higher value in terms of what comes in, via non-oil export. But up until that time, we will not see much in terms of non-oil export. And I think to do that also, we need to put in place the right infrastructure. It is very instructive because that is what will take us away from raw materials to manufacturing, and not just manufacturing, but manufacturing in large quantity. And then you export in large quantity to earn a lot more foreign inflows via non-oil export. It is important. The government can do it, but cannot do it alone. There is need for collaboration between the government and the corporate end of the country.
Let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll continue this conversation. I still have Mr. Tajuddin Ibrahim here to continue this conversation, and also we'll still be shifting to talk telecoms, updates in that industry. Don't go away. This is Business Nigeria with Tolulope Ogunjobi. We'll be right back with you. Glad to have you back. I still have Mr. Tajuddin Ibrahim in the house to speak around global economic issues. Mr. Ibrahim, thank you so much for your patience. Yeah, so wrapping up now, what do you think would be the entire outlook, like I said, for the global and, of course, Nigerian space?
I think comfortably we can see what looks like below 3% in terms of global growth outlook.
3%.
Around 3% or a little below that number, assuming that all of the elements for consideration, speaking to trade policy in the U.S., speaking to commodity production, particularly crude oil output globally, and also indicating what happens in terms of the unrest in the Middle East. I think if we put all of those elements together, comfortably we can see a little below 3% for the global economy. If we come down to Nigeria, I think 3.5% looks like the number we can see for Nigeria, because we have reforms that have, largely speaking, paved the way for that growth to materialize. I think, broadly speaking, the outlook for the global economy is positive, and also positive for Nigeria.
Indeed. I think it is a good way to wrap this conversation up now. Thank you so much, Mr. Tajuddin, for starting the show with us. And to say some teething challenges, but at least thank God we're able to have it. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this. Thank you. Well, let's go on a break, or let's